everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits and I'm so excited for today's video. Today we are going to revisit one of my favorite with a twist techniques. We are going to be dyeing skeins of yarn 3 times, twisting them up and dyeing them in a different color for a really fun sort of random variegated effect. The big twist on this twisted technique today is that we are going to look at 4 different yarn bases, 2 superwash and 2 non-superwash. I've done this technique on, I think, only sock yarn so far, so I'm curious what kind of results we might see on a DK weight superwash yarn, but then also a DK weight non-superwash yarn. Today's video is sponsored by Bernie Crum. Bernie, thank you so much for sponsoring this video. If you at home would like to learn how you could sponsor an episode of Dyepot Weekly, get some shout outs in the video, plus get 100 grams of yarn that I dye in the video sent to you, you can find details for the sponsorship listing in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. Today we will use 3 of my favorite yarn bases and one that I'm honestly not sure if I've tried. We'll be dyeing Swish DK, which is 100% superwash merino, Stroll fingering weight yarn, which is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. And for our non-superwash comparison, we have wool of the Andes, which is a worsted weight 100% Peruvian Highland wool. And the one that I might have dyed this once, but I'm not sure. We've got merino style DK. This yarn is 100% merino, but it's not superwash. The reason why I'm doing 4 different skeins in this video is that there is some variation that we can get in this kind of colorway just based on how I twist the yarn. And so I thought that by having a few more examples in each pot, that could help us see more of a difference between like maybe a sharpness of a color that we might see in the superwash pot versus maybe we'll see more spread, maybe we won't in the non-superwash. But either way, I am excited and curious to see how this will turn out. If you would like to learn more about any of the yarn or equipment that I use in my videos, you can find affiliate links to both KnitPicks and Amazon in the video description. I will be labeling the skeins 1, 2, 3, 4 with some zip ties so that way I make sure I don't mix any of them up. Whenever I twist the yarn for this video, I will be doing so loosely. You can see that there is fluff in here. You could twist tighter if you want. The tighter you twist it, the more resist there will be in the yarn. But one of the big perks of this is this like random placement that you can get. Our beautiful twists are ready to go. I tried again to keep it as loose and fluffy as possible. I mean, we want the resist to be there, but we also want color penetration. And so we should have some patches of pigment, and there might also be some white or pastels left in there as well, which will be totally fine. For our colors today, we are going to play with some Dharma Sour Apple, some Jacquard Bright Yellow, and some Jacquard Brilliant Blue. A lot of times when I do this, I might start with like a palest color. Not that yellow is pale, but it can easily be overtaken. However, I think I want to finish with the yellow today because I want to make sure that some of that yellow ends up in the yarn. And I think that the best possible way of doing that is to expose some white areas at the end with that yellow. So I think our order is going to be green, followed by blue, followed by yellow. On the stovetop, I have my 2 dedicated dye pots heating up. It's gonna take some time, but we'll get there. In each of them, I have 24 cups of water. You can see the water level's a lot higher in the 8-quart pot than the 12-quart pot, but I wanted to start with plenty of water so I can try to keep the conditions as similar as possible throughout the process. I am going to add a 1/2 cup or 8 tablespoons of white vinegar to each of the pots. This is slightly higher than the concentration of 2 tablespoons of vinegar per 8 cups of water that I frequently start with, but I think it should still be okay. And I'm going to add a 1/4 cup approximately of our 1% stock solution into each of our pots. We're going to start with the superwash. We are approaching a boil, and I am going to take our 2 superwash skeins and sink them into the pot. I'm going to use a slotted spoon. For this experiment, we set up 2 pots because in general, superwash yarn absorbs color faster than non-superwash yarn. And I want to look at the twist and the spread of the colors and hoping that the total level of saturation will be pretty similar across the board. It doesn't matter if the 2 pots start at exactly the same time because everything within the pots is very similar. But now that we are nice and submerged, I'm gonna let this go for at least 10 minutes or until we see that the water has cleared. Here we are with our non-superwash yarn. And this, oh, actually these might sink in nice and easy as well. Some types of yarn take a little bit more effort to submerge than others, and that is sort of dependent on the yarn brand. I wasn't entirely sure about the Merino style DK yarn, but I do know that Wool of the Andes sort of goes in pretty well. I'm also going to leave this pot at just below a boil until, it's hard to see on camera, but there is still color in here, until we see that the color has absorbed. And yeah, we'll come back and check in somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes. One reason why color could end up looking more saturated on our superwash yarn than the non-superwash is that we might get some places where the color strikes a lot faster on the superwash, making the color look deeper, and if the color spreads out more, then it might look less pigmented over here on the non-superwash. But again, we'll wait until we've absorbed this color. After about 10 minutes, we have pretty good color coverage. Ooh, and you can see some of that white when I lift up. I would say the color is completely absorbed on our superwash yarn. Let's check the non. Actually, it looks like it's pretty much absorbed there as well. So what we're gonna do now is turn off the heats on the pots. And this is the part that can start to take a little while with this technique, because we are gonna need the yarn to cool enough so that way I can comfortably retwist it without risking any burns or anything like that. So what I will do is one at a time remove, and I'm trying to let as much of the color drain out, sort of squeezing it against the side of the pot as possible. The less water in the yarn right now means that the faster it'll cool. In my experience, we will untwist them as early as we can. We will reuse this water for the rest of the dyeing. Oh, which one is this one? Well, this is the Merino style. That's really pretty. Really, really pretty. Okay, and even with the yarn hot, with the help of my tongs, we can start untwisting it, which will also help it cool off. So this one is number 3. This is our Wool of the Andes, and I guess it's not completely untwisted, but I do see really good color coverage with that green. The Merino style sort of untwisted a bit already. Here's number 2, the Stroll, and in here you can really see, as I've opened this up, there's like that big white section from the resist that we get just based on, just from it being twisted. And here is our Swish, which right now looks a bit like the Stroll. So again, I'm going to set this aside so it can cool, hopefully as fast as possible, so then we can take a look as we twist them up for the next round. Looking through the yarn, I would say number 2, the Stroll, has the biggest patch of white. Bernie, your Swish DK does have some white, but we got a little more coverage of some of that green in there. The Merino style has a nice white stretch, but it's more of a pale green in the wool of the Andes. I feel like these have some white, but just sort of my initial gut reflex is that, you know, and sort of as expected, the pigment spread a little more here. This time the yarn will be going in damp, and so that can affect the way that colors could absorb a bit. When I am twisting up the yarn for the next stage, I try to arrange it so that the widest white patch from the first dip will be towards the outside of the yarn. I'm still trying to keep the twist pretty loose, but this time there's already acid in the yarn, it's already wet. Things might start striking a little bit faster. But if you can see white on the outside, then that'll help you make sure that you get that coverage. And so here, there's more pastel over there, so that's the outside that I'm going to be using for this next round. But really, you could choose to do it however you want. But my goal is to get, is to break up any large patches of any one color each time. And now we are ready for that second dip. Clearly, there's still some green on the outside, but we are layering these colors together, and with each dip, the color probably won't penetrate super far on the inside, but by twisting and then sort of arranging and fluffing, we can sort of help the colors access different parts. We can set up the color for round 2 even before the yarn is ready to go. And of this Jacquard Brilliant Blue, I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons of the color to each of the pots, and maybe a tad more, but keeping things very even. We are nice and hot. 4, 3. I'm attempting to keep things in approximately the same pots that they were in before. Ooh, that's pretty. Pretty. The nice thing about the yarn already being wet is this time it's going to go into the pot really easily and sort of sink down. I don't want to stir it a ton. I mean, I don't mind if the blue color penetrates deeper than where we have it, but what I don't want is for these to accidentally untwist themselves, because that will alter this resist technique that we have going on. So anyway, I'll come back in about 10 minutes. Oh, and Bernie, so I'm thinking about the colors. Like, my plan is to do yellow next. That is my plan. But we'll see when we unwrap these if it feels like the yellow might make an impact or not. It depends on how much white is left overall. Because if we couldn't get a hint of yellow on there, then maybe we'll want to shift and do something like a navy for the last one. But either way, we will see where we are color-wise in a little bit. After 10 minutes, there is still some color in both pots, so I'm going to let this go another 10. After an additional 10 minutes, I'm still seeing some blue pigment, and you can see some blue pigment in the pot with our non-superwash, and it has mostly cleared in our superwash pot. I could add more vinegar at this point, but I don't really want to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the heat on both pots and leave the yarn in here for, I think, just another 20 minutes. We'll see how much color we absorb and then remove the yarn. And if there's still color left in the pots, then I will grab a yarn mop to soak up that leftover color before we go ahead to our final color. If I were 100% certain that the next color is going to be yellow, then I might not bother with a yarn mop. But given that, okay, the water basically cleared over here. We'll see the other one, that's the question. Ooh, color is so pretty. The color has almost completely cleared here. And given that I think I might still go with yellow as the next color, oh, that's looking really clear. Let's just see, because I have a tiny bit of leftover dye from today anyway. This is a skein of KnitPicks Hawthorne fingering weight yarn. It is 80% superwash fine Highland wool, 20% polyamide. There's really not much pigment at all in there. We don't really need a mop, but it's just nice to double check. From that quick dip, I would say that there is a hint of color here in this yarn, but nothing really more. I will go ahead and dye this with all the leftovers at the end of the video, but I was just curious, and if we are going to do yellow, a little bit of blue in there could shift it green really easily, so that's why I wanted a mop just in case. Yarn mop aside, let's open up these skeins carefully. This one is number 4. Ooh, that is so pretty. Okay, we do have some lighter patches there in the interior, but we've got pretty good color coverage so far. Coming in at number 3, this is our Wool of the Andes. Nice. Okay, we definitely, goodness, this color really could go in 2 directions. There's some lighter patches in here as well. I think some yellow hints would pop and it'll turn the colorway overall more green. But you can see that there's not a lot of true white in either of those colors right now. Let's go in here. In contrast, we still have a lot of color coverage, but we definitely have some pure white here on the Stroll. And finally on Bernie's Swish DK, let's open this up. I'm seeing a little more white. This color is so pretty right now. The differences between the colorways right now is very subtle. Again, there's a lot of variables depending on the looseness or tightness of the twist that really can limit the amount of color that goes in. So we really will have to see how things feel on that final yarn. I'm sitting here just sort of shifting on my feet because I think that whichever direction I went, yellow or navy, it would be really beautiful. I think I'm going to stick with yellow because that was my original vision, but I think that this colorway with some dark pops of navy on top near the end, or even just honestly, it all like dipped quickly in a navy bath, would be stunning. As I loosely twisted up the skeins for the final dip into yellow, I made sure to try to get some areas of white on the outside of the skein. I really hope that some of the blue is on the more interior portion because I would love some of that blue to stick behind, but I still think that this colorway is going to be so cool. When I'm dyeing colors, I like to think about the colors and how to layer them and to talk about that because sometimes I know what I want to do right away and other times I do have a vision, but then I have other ideas midway through, and so sometimes it's hard to just commit and stick with a plan. But I think that whichever direction I went with this colorway, sticking with the yellow or swapping to navy, it would be beautiful. But let me know in the comments which way you personally would have gone. Okay, let's go and add these to our yellow dye. This is a different yellow than the one I used back when I was first playing around with the colorway for the 2019 ChemKnits Hanukkah special, but I am going to go ahead and we're just going to use 1 tablespoon of this yellow color per pot. It's not a lot of color at all. With this final color, my feeling is to go a little more soft. I don't want to overwhelm the things that are there currently, but I'd like to add a different hint and shift. And if there's any white that's left behind on the interior, I don't want that to feel super out of place either. So that's why I'm going a little softer here. I think if I was doing navy, I probably would have added more dye, even though that's an already more pigmented color. But we're gonna let this all heat up a bit more because I've just had the heat off for a while, and then we'll add the yarn. I probably should have said this earlier, but all of the tools and equipment I'm using today are dedicated dye equipment that I don't use for food. And when it comes to variables that we're dealing with here today, there is another variable, and that could be the temperature of the pots. That could definitely shift how much color is absorbed, where it is absorbed, and things like that. In addition to the twist and the fiber content and all of that jazz. Actually, the weight of the yarn and how much surface area there is also could be a factor in here, but oh, I'm excited. All right, I'm gonna set a timer for 10 minutes and we'll come and see how much color has absorbed. Ooh, it wasn't a ton of yellow, but it definitely made an impact. So we still see some of that blue. I'm glad about that, but there's also some more teal in there, which I think is really, really fun. The yellow is not overwhelming it. It's not too loud. I think it's just enough that it gave us more green feeling. I'm not sure how much like full-on yellow I'm feeling in here versus maybe you would call that like a very yellow green, but I think it's fun. I mean, in here, yeah, that's still feeling more yellow green than being like a full-on pop of yellow, but I think it's okay, and I think it sort of works with these colors. All right, I'm going to, most of it has absorbed. I'm gonna go ahead and turn off the pots and leave the yarn in here maybe for 20 minutes, half an hour, something like that, to cool off a little bit before we remove and take a look at these colorways. Okay, everything is still hot, but I'm gonna remove the yarn from the pots and set it aside so it can cool. Now, our yarn mop currently only has the barest hint of color, but I do have a little leftover green, which is gonna look like a little more nothing. It's another little whisper. The pot is still warm, but I'm just adding the yarn in. I think that, yeah, whatever was in there this time was actually not perceptible. That is so funny. But, all right, I'm gonna put this in the other pot I still have right now, and we've got some leftover blue that is a bit more substantial. That one wasn't very much, but I did use up all of my Brilliant Blue, and so I have filled our bottle, rinsed it out, and I'm gonna rinse this out one more time. The second rinse is really not adding very much color at all. But this is enough to give us like a nice pastel yarn. So I'm now going to go back in to our yarn mop. And we're just warm, not hot. And we're going to put it in. And I'm not even really dip dyeing as much as just slowly adding it in. I wouldn't call the water hot. I mean, it's maybe as warm as, say, hot tap water, but it's not particularly like way too hot or anything. But this is a really lovely baby blue tonal that we have happening here, and I imagine that without even, yeah, we're almost cleared. I'm just going to leave this in here and sit until the water is clear to absorb that leftover color. But this is just another example of how leaving no dye behind can result in some beautiful, beautiful colorways. And they aren't always pastels either, but it's just a fun way to use up what's left over at the inside of a bottle. All right, I think this one is number 4, so our Merino style. We've got, so I'm not feeling a lot of yellow, but we do have a lot of greens, and it's so pretty. Number 3. Yeah, I think that the navy would have given in some more contrast, and I think that if we could have gotten some pops of yellow, that actual yellow, then that would have been a nice contrast. But we've ended up with this more green with pops of blue, which is still really, really pretty. Even here, we barely have any specifically yellow pops, but I'm not mad because that yellow that we added did bring us more dimension and tones within these greens. You can go for something with much, much higher contrast, like if we had gone with a navy in the end. But I think you can also use this technique on something that ends up being a little more subtle. This isn't quite what my vision was, but I still really, really like it, and I'm really, really happy with the results. And Bernie, I hope that you will be really thrilled with it as well. I'm now gonna let this yarn finish cooling so then we can wash it. We are gonna wash all of the superwash yarn together right now. You know, I think if I wanted to preserve some of that yellow, maybe I should have started with it first. But it's hard to say. It's easier to like pinch and tuck things early on, but I don't know, I think it's beautiful. All these different shades of green. So, so pretty. Okay, I'm gonna add a tiny bit of some clear dish soap, but I'm not expecting to see any bleeding. Yeah, so far so good. I'm gonna rinse out all of the soap and then set the yarn in my spin dryer to wait for our non-superwash skeins. Here we go. I'm gonna be a little more gentle because these are non-superwash. But I am very excited with how similar all the colorways feel. I'm curious if once it's dry, the colors here on the non-superwash yarn feel a little softer and a little more blended, but we will see. I'm doing all this washing in just cool tap water, and again I'm adding a little soap, but I am not expecting to see any bleeding. Once I finish washing this and get the soap out, this will go through the spin dryer with all the rest of the yarn, and we'll come back for some conclusions once everything is dry. Here is the yarn that we dyed in today's video. And with the exception of our beautiful pastel Leave No Dye Behind, these 4 skeins look really, really similar to one another. We played with our superwash yarn, our Swish and Stroll, and our non-superwash yarn, Wool of the Andes, and Merino style DK. Of these, I mean, obviously it's qualitatively, this is a visual observation. The Stroll, our fingering weight skein, seems to have the most white patches in it. If I open it up, there are, I would say that these patches of color are a bit smaller. You can sort of see throughout. Whereas on, say, Wool of the Andes, there are still some small patches, like see those small patches of blue, but I do feel less white over here. I'm not sure if it is a superwash versus not superwash issue or a fingering versus worsted weight. The DK seems to fall somewhere in the middle with some white patches on our non-superwash merino, and yeah, I mean, they look very, very similar to one another. I've compared Wool of the Andes to Stroll a lot here over the course of Dyepot Weekly. And with something like speckles, yeah, the speckles strike super fast on a superwash yarn versus the non-superwash yarn. But in this instance, it's a little harder to say because the elements, like the amount of twist that you put into the yarn, make such a big impact on this overall technique that I don't really have a definitive conclusion, except I really like all the yarn. I love this yarn. We've got it really is a sky colored yarn where we have some paler blue with a hint of yellow, maybe some clouds with a little bit of sun on them. And then we've got more of the pure blue in here as well, but it is soft and pretty. Bernie, thank you so much for sponsoring this episode of Dyepot Weekly. I had a lot of fun dyeing this yarn side by side on 4 different yarn bases. And even if there weren't a dramatic difference between them, it's great because sometimes you want to replicate a colorway on different yarn bases and have it feel similar. So it's nice when there's something where that can work well. I'm sure that there are likely conditions where maybe if I had slightly lower acid or even higher acid, where we could exaggerate the difference between the superwash and non-superwash skeins. But I'm gonna leave it at this because I'm happy and I love this yarn. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. While you're at it, give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Would you have gone with the yellow as the third color, or would you have gone for more contrast and gone for the navy? I haven't forgotten and I've written that down and I hope to play with that sometime in the future. If you are already a huge fan of ChemKnits and want to help support the content on this channel, go and check out the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. The shop is filled with hundreds of skeins of hand-dyed yarn featured in these videos. On each listing, you can even see the title of the video and the date the video is published, so that way you can go back and watch and see more information about the yarn in that listing. It is an ultimate win-win-win because you can get some beautiful hand-dyed indie yarn and you can support the content here on the channel at the same time. You can find links to the shop in the video description and that little eye symbol, that eye card in the top corner of the screen. Thank you so much for watching.